Somewhere in the South Korean countryside, there is a village where the youngest resident is 53 years old. According to Statistics Korea, more than 1,800 villages across the country now have no children enrolled in any local school. That is not a forecast. It has already happened. The question is not whether these places are shrinking. The question is, what happens to a society when whole communities simply stop existing? And the answer, it turns out, has implications far beyond Korea's borders. The scale of the shift is striking when you put the figures side by side. Statistics Korea reports that, as of the early 2020s, roughly 92% of South Korea's population lives in urban areas, one of the highest urbanization rates in the world. The population of rural counties known as Gun in Korean has been falling for 6 consecutive decades. In 228 rural municipalities tracked by the Korea Rural Economic Institute, the average age of a farming household head has risen above 67 years. The Ministry of Education has closed or merged more than 3,800 rural schools since 2000, with dozens more flagged for closure each year. And the land itself reflects the exit. The Korea Rural Community Corporation estimates that well over 100,000 hectares of farmland now sit idle, uncultivated, because there is simply no one left to work it. This did not happen by accident. It was the product of one of the fastest and most deliberate economic transformations in modern history. Beginning in the 1960s, South Korea's government funneled investment into a small number of industrial cities: Seoul, Busan, Ulsan, Incheon. Factories needed workers, and the countryside had them. Young people left in their hundreds of thousands, decade after decade, drawn by wages that simply could not be matched by rice farming. The OECD has noted that Korea's rural-to-urban migration rate in that period was among the steepest ever recorded for a peacetime economy. By the time policymakers tried to reverse the flow, through rural development subsidies and the Saemaeul Undong village renewal movement of the 1970s, the pattern was already self-reinforcing. Fewer young people meant fewer schools. Fewer schools meant fewer reasons for young families to stay. Each closed classroom made the next departure more likely. The economist Albert Hirschman called this an exit spiral, and Korea built one at national scale. The costs are now landing all at once. The Korean government's own fiscal projections, published through the Ministry of the Interior and Safety, warn that dozens of rural local governments face insolvency within 15 years as their tax bases collapse alongside their populations. Food security is a growing concern. The Korea Rural Economic Institute notes that the nation's food self-sufficiency ratio for grain fell to around 21% by the early 2020s, among the lowest in the OECD. And the social toll is harder to quantify, but no less real. Studies published through the Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs document elevated rates of depression and isolation among elderly rural residents, many of whom go days without meaningful human contact. The village is not merely an economic unit. When it disappears, it takes with it a specific way of knowing the land, a set of agricultural practices, and a form of community care that urban institutions have struggled to replace. Korea is not alone in this, and that is precisely why it matters. Japan's rural depopulation crisis predates Korea's by roughly 20 years, and the villages that vanished there are now studied as a preview of what comes next. China, Taiwan, and parts of Eastern Europe are moving along the same trajectory. What Korea's experience shows, more clearly than almost any other case, is that rapid economic growth and the survival of rural communities can be genuinely incompatible, at least without extraordinary and sustained political will to resist the pull of agglomeration. The woman in the indigo jacket, tending a field that her grandchildren will never farm, is not a relic of a failed society. She is the evidence of a successful one that forgot to ask what it was leaving behind. That is the question every fast-growing economy will eventually have to answer.